Nice. And we are live right now on Second City Gridiron. You guys also catch us over on our Twitter feed and our Facebook feed as well. Both also called Second City Gridiron. And I got Mason West in the house again. Mason, what's up, man?
And nowhere else I'd rather be on a Friday night than talking Bears Packers though. It's not bad.
Bears Packers. It's going to be should be a fun game as long as Aaron Rodgers doesn't go too nuts here. But that's my fear. Aaron Rodgers is going to be so pissed off after he being so bad that he's going to do Aaron Rodgers things to the Bears again.
Yeah, you just get those flashbacks to even just last year, right? The I own you and all that. Oh man, it hurts. It really does.
At some point he's has to fall off the cliff. He's what, 38, 39? It's like, come on. At some point it's coming. He's got a very odd lifestyle, but at some point I think it's just going to hit him.
We could do a whole podcast on discussing like the stuff he was doing this summer and like the things, the in and outs, especially things coming out of his body. That's a whole other conversation.
It was just, the memes, the jokes, everyone had something to say about that. It was just very, very odd. And it's like, as Bears fans, we're like, yes, keep acting weird, keep doing that goofy stuff. At some point, get the hell out of here. Cause I'm not sure Jordan loves it, but I want to see them try to see if he's the guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know. I got a feeling it could be this year, especially after what we saw last week.
That was rough last week. I wouldn't expect. I mean, they don't really always. I mean, they were rough last year, week one. So, yeah, I guess it wasn't to be unexpected, but still, it was like that's just rough. And he just looked frustrated. Then, of course, his receiving core is like, where are they? So it's you can sense the frustration, coming. And then at some point, it's just going to be an explosion. And I'm here for it, my friend.
Oh, 100%.
Crazy. All right, you about ready to record a podcast?
Let's do it.
All right. What is up, Chicago Bears fans? This is T-Formation Conversation. I'm your host, Lester Wiltfong. Just like I was last week, I'm joined by my guy, Mason West, Dr. Mason West, to kind of give us the inside skinny on the Bears and the Packers injury report here this week. Mason, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Actually, really excited for this upcoming weekend. I get to sit back, veg, and enjoy my Sunday afternoon without worrying about the Bears. And then I get to dwell and, pull my hair out, Sunday night. So it's all good.
Do you like the Bears on primetime, or are you one of these guys that you always want them at noon?
Man, that's such a good question. I do like, there's something special, right? It's different. Like the camera quality is better when you're watching on TV. To have some of the national, guys talking and commenting, it just hits a little different. So I do really like it. And plus then for my fantasy purposes, I can watch a lot more games in the afternoon.
Are you a red zone guy?
Oh yeah. I usually will have the red zone on one screen. I got 3 others on like in that same one. And then I got my side one for the local cable going on. So I usually have like 5 channels going.
I'm embarrassed to say this. I literally just discovered Red Zone last year.
Oh,
for some reason, I thought it was part of the Sunday Ticket. All these years, I thought it's a ticket thing, so I don't have it. And then my buddy's like, "It's on NFL Network." It's one. I'm like, "What?" And then I look, and I'm like, "Oh my god, this is such a cool way to watch." When I'm not watching the Bears, of course, just to watch all the other stuff that's going on. So it was kind of crazy to see those. So Bears, Packers, Sunday Night Football, and here on T-Formation Conversation, I've turned into the in-season injury show, kind of get you guys, up to speed, what's going on there with everything. And it's kind of a small report. It's early in the year, so it's to be expected. But before we get into the actual injured guys, I want to talk a little bit about what happened earlier this week. Offensive lineman Alex Leatherwood went on the NFI list. And since he went on that list, he has to miss a minimum of 4 weeks, 4 games, I should say. And the report came out that he had mono. Of course, social media starts talking, it's mono, what's the big deal? Get out there, rub some dirt on it, whatever it is. But from your perspective, this could be a pretty severe thing where, you got to make sure he's right before he comes back, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's all across the spectrum in terms of what you can get. Always pretty much you get your fatigue, your sore throat, fever, headache, things like that. You don't worry as much about that. That's the throw some dirt on it part of it. The thing that's a little more concerning is there's an incubation period, 4 to 6 weeks. So you could infect other people and you don't even know necessarily that you have it. before those symptoms kick on. But the thing that you're really concerned with is that you actually get an enlargement of your spleen, and where that spleen sits, right, just below the rib cage on the side. In those extreme cases, if you get hit, it can rupture. You get sharp, sudden pain in that left side of your upper abdomen, and you're going to need surgery if that happens, because you can get sepsis and internal bleeding, and you can die. So, that, considering the position he's playing, that's kind of the big deal, where it's pretty easy to get that rupture. You can get other things like some liver issues, like just inflammation of the liver. You can get some jaundice going on, and really you need to avoid physical activity. So even just something like lifting, but definitely contact sports, things of that nature, for 4 weeks, a month, before you're allowed to go back, before that spleen actually shrinks down a bit and you're safe from having that rupture happen.
So the NFI list is a little different than injury reserve. This year, the injury reserve list, you can't come off after 4 games. I think it's up to 8 players you come off. The NFI list is the non-football injury list, which is, of course, with the illness here. So it's a minimum 4 games. You're thinking definitely going to be missing them for 4 weeks, at least minimum, you're thinking.
At a minimum. I mean, that's the go-to that any doc's going to tell anyone that's got mononucleosis.
It's rough for Leatherwood. I mean, obviously the Bears signed him real late in the process. He was inactive last week. So I mean, we weren't expecting a lot out of him early on with the Bears. He has to get up to speed with the playbook. He has to understand what's going on. They got to get his position figured out still. But still, the fact that they're missing a guy that's a former first-round draft pick, that hurts the long-term development. But like a little behind the scenes, we're actually in a Bears chat together. And when you mentioned the whole thing with the spleen about, like he could die. I'm like, well, we have to talk about this on the show, because that's some people that no one probably really don't know that part of it, but that's a big deal.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love football. I really do. Played it in high school. Like, wish I did it in college. I only got to do wrestling and lacrosse. If they would let me do the third sport, but like at the end of the day, it's not worth your life, right? And it's 4 weeks. 4 weeks in the spectrum of, in theory, what Leatherwood's supposed to be, because he's supposed to be a project this entire time anyway. Yeah. Like, you're hoping he doesn't have to play this year. You want him in practices. You want him as your, hopefully, maybe even 7th lineman in terms of potentially that rotation. So, yes, it delays that. You don't have the practice reps. You're not around the team, all those things. But you're better safe than sorry. It's fine.
So he'll be away from the team. Obviously, is it contagious? I'm assuming.
Yes, it is. And then eventually, after that 4-week period, you can come back because you're no longer contagious.
So the 4 weeks he's gone. Limited physical activity. Is there any danger here in like it's sapping some of his strength and some of his energy and stuff? Is that going to be like a lingering effect, or pretty much once the symptoms are gone, will he be able to get back and really start training again like he wants to?
So similar to what I said at the beginning, a little bit of a spectrum. Some people it's a couple weeks, but some people it's 2 to 3 months before you feel completely normal.
Okay.
If you're a more trained individual, usually you can get that back a little quicker. If he's not the couch potato eating, potato chips and all that stuff, it might take you a little longer. But because he is an athlete, because he's a trained individual, it should be closer to a couple weeks versus that 1 to 2 months.
I gotcha. Interesting stuff. So one more offensive lineman for the Bears before we move on to the actual injury report, and that's Lucas Patrick, right guard, rotational right guard last week. And we talked about last week a little bit about that cast. We were both pretty adamant that that's a bad idea. Let Tevin Jenkins play. Once Patrick's ready to snap, he can snap. But I got to tell you, man, watching that game, seeing the rotation, now it helped. Jenkins played well. Patrick also played well. That helped it. But I kind of understand the whole point of it. Wanting to get his conditioning in there, because playing in a game is different than practice, obviously. Getting the conditioning in there. So were you okay as the game went on that they were making that switch back and forth, or were you still like, nah, man, let's just play the one guy? Which way were you kind of going as the game went on?
I understand the why. And I know, first of all, that's a sentence that a lot of Bears fans don't like hearing. Well, what is the why? But I understand it because, like you just said, he didn't play like any football this summer. And as soon as that cast comes off, as soon as he can get back to his snapping, you want to slide him right back into that center, and you don't want him to be behind the 8 ball at all. So like you're talking the conditioning, the muscle memory, and right guard is not the same muscle memory as center, but it's better than a sideline in terms of muscle memory. So I understand that point. My hope is that there was really good communication between the coaches and between Patrick and Jenkins, right? And that was something we talked about a little bit, was Jenkins and the mentality and the confidence. If it's more like, hey, this is nothing against you, Tevin, we're doing this because like basically all the reasons we just said here, I think it would go pretty well as long as you're communicating well and it's understood versus it being a, hey, Tevin, if you mess up, you're out of here kind of a thing. So it does make sense. Every once in a while you hear that phrase, if you have two quarterbacks, you actually have none. And that does apply to a lot of positions. But this seems like it could be one of the few times that, this is fine.
So last week on the show, we talked a little bit about why he couldn't snap. I know, like we talked about, before week one, the way I thought was, hey, if you're okay to play guard, you're going to be up there with some grip stuff. And we did see he had a full cast, so he had no grip strength. But I know for the guys that didn't have a chance to hear you get into what the actual the ligament damage, the thumb damage, the broken area on the thumb here, like talk a little bit about why the snapping is different than doing other part of his job there on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you have the surgery like he had, if it was just a traditional break, you probably would just have casted it up and been fine. You usually do the surgery if there's going to be some type of ligament damage or tendon damage, and that's going to affect the muscular strength in that respect. Now, when you cast like you do, you really have to make it so it's immobile. And if it's immobile, you cannot do opposition with your thumb, which is that movement of thumb to pinky, if you can do that. If you can't do that, you cannot snap a ball. Like if try to throw a ball without actually pulling your thumb in, try to have any control, you can't. It's ridiculously hard to do. That relates to the whole Dak Prescott conversation. That's something for maybe a Cowboys podcast. That's insane that they're talking about 4 weeks for him, by the way.
Oh, that's terrible.
But back to you just don't have the strength or control to be able to do that. And as we saw, he was in a club. It wasn't even just the thumb taped up. They gave him like the battering ram club to have complete safety control there. It was actually pretty impressive that he was able to block as well as he did without being able to wrap up at all.
Yeah, I was impressed. Like I said, I was totally against it. But then as the game going on, you kind of see how he's able to get out there. And I guess coming from Green Bay, they used to that hug technique from the O-line, so it's not quite as much grabbing that you normally see. So he had that going on a little bit, but he's a vet, and I thought it was good to get him out there. And I'm guessing it's gonna be the same thing this week. Him and Jenkins will rotate a little bit, and then once the cast comes off, okay. Do you think it's one of those things where he's going to be immediately able to go back to snapping, or will there be like another transition period before you can actually, maybe a week or two before you can actually, grip that ball?
Every training room is going to be a little different, but if they're doing their jobs correctly in the interim, they are doing the hand strengthening. They are doing things to work on that. He is in that time period where you're safe to do those things. 6 to 8 weeks is really where that bone itself is healed. If there was a tendon repair, that's also going to be more or less preset. So you should be doing some pretty aggressive strengthening of that hand. And so when they've decided, okay, we're good to go, you're going to be playing without that cast on, he should slide right back into center. I would be thinking like your window starts next week, and the longest part of that window being 2 weeks later.
Okay, now you mentioned strengthening the grip. You're talking like just some strengthening muscle stuff with the thumb, the hand, stuff like that. The flexing of the muscle. That what you're kind of talking about?
There's things like that. There's a couple different ways you do it. You do like the obvious ones with rubber bands and balls and that. But you're also going to get into some grip strength, like farmer's carries, right? Can you take that kettlebell? Can you be carrying it around? You could want to be doing some crush plate stuff, put 2 plates together, 2 25s, 2 45s. Can you hold it in what's considered this kind of grip like so? If you can do that and walk around, that's going to be huge. And also what a lot of the teams are using right now is something called blood flow restriction training. The simple way to put it is restrict the blood flow down into the appendage. And what you actually can do is you can work at 30% of your 1 rep max, but get results like you're working at your 1 rep max. And what that ends up doing is you get a flood of these metabolites. Your human growth hormone goes up, your myostatin goes down when myostatin inhibits muscle growth. So depressing that as much as you can is important. And you take stress off of the bone, the ligament, the tendon, and the muscles just get blasted with all these good metabolites. And all of a sudden, a 4-week, 6-week strength program can get cut in almost half.
It's just, if you're watching the video, I'm sitting here smiling because it's awesome hearing you talk. You're so knowledgeable, and it's just such a different perspective hearing someone who actually knows what they're talking about with these injuries, as opposed to the put some tussin on it guy on Twitter that's talking. So it's basically, I appreciate, I know I told you before, but I really appreciate you jumping on the show, kind of giving us the perspective of the injury report. So let's get into that report. We're talking about Bears Packers Sunday Night Football. boom, I got a little graphic here for you guys watching us on the show. The Bears only have one guy, really. That's Velus Jones Jr., hamstring. Again, he's doubtful. He did not practice. We talked about him last week a little bit. You're thinking you're pretty sure he wouldn't play last week. You're pretty sure he's not going to play again this week?
Oh, he's out. 100% out.
Yeah.
He would need God himself to come down and slap a new hamstring in there. And it's not to say because the hamstring's in a terrible spot. It's just everyone's body is a little different. Everyone reacts a little differently. It's only a grade 1 hamstring by my understanding, but he keeps re-aggravating it. And when you just keep little re-aggravating in that way, it's just never going to get back to what it needs to be. And when you look at the kind of player he is a long strider. He's all about speed. You need that hamstring to have all phases, right? We talked about that a little bit last week, the concentric, the eccentric, and the isometric. And you need to be able to run pain-free. And if you've been hampered and you've been sidelined, there's no way your conditioning is where it needs to be, no matter what you're doing in your off time. And there's no way that you're going to be able to confidently be able to plant to make your blocks that you need to do and things like that. So no, there's no way that he's going to be playing this week. I would still think he's not in next week, to be completely honest, but it's more likely that he's back next week, but I would still think he's going to be out.
So of course, the way social media is, people are Kevin White 2.0. You hear these, the Bears have had a tradition of having some injured guys they've drafted. And so of course I understand the fans having their guard up, but we're not talking about a tear. We're not talking about a something broken. We're talking about a strain. What you said, a grade 1.
Mm-hmm.
Right now it's just a matter of resting it. And then at some point he'll be back 100% good to go.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the thing that you have to think about long-term with these things, right? Again, he's a rookie and he's got a decent career ahead of him if he can maintain his health. It's just a matter of, can he load it appropriately? Is he getting the right looks? A lot of rookies, here's a little looking behind the curtain a little bit when it comes to NFL. The young guys come in and thinking they're invincible. You see it all the time. They skip training room sessions. They don't get help outside. They don't seek out physical therapists and athletic trainer and chiropractors outside. And they try to take care of a lot of these injuries themselves because they were able to do that even in college. Now, the veterans, they're the ones that realize you need to invest in your body. And so he's probably a rookie making rookie mistakes, thinking, hey, I'll be fine. Like you're saying, like throw some icy hot on it, put some ice on it, I'll bounce right back. No, this is different. This is the NFL. The OTAs were different, right? The training camp was different. It's put a different kind of strain on you. And so there's a little bit of a learning curve to it.
So is this an injury where it's going to hamper him? Or do you think like once he's healed, he's good to go, but it's just a matter of getting to that point?
If he keeps up with the things he needs to do, he will be fine.
Okay.
The problem is, and this is something that you see even like in your physical therapy patients every day, they start feeling better and they stop doing your exercises. You stop, working on that part. And then all of a sudden you come in a week later and it's like, oh, this is really bugging me again. It's like, so have you been doing your exercises? And the answer is normally no. It's like, okay, well, do your stuff. And especially because his body is his tool, it should be something that is going to happen. But, I've heard some pretty rough stories. I'm talking to some of the physical therapists and trainers in the NFL where it's like, dude, blah, 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 this all-pro wide receiver, he doesn't care. He just doesn't take care of his body because he just thinks it should happen naturally, and it doesn't. And then all of a sudden you have someone whose career gets cut short. So if to answer to long story short, it can be fine if he continues to put the work in the right places.
Well, they get that invincible mentality. They've always been the alpha. They've always been the stud. They step on the field and they're the best guy out there. So it's a learning curve. And you mentioned a lot of times with the rookies, that's how they come in. With the veterans, man, they know, take care of your body, nutrition, health, stretching, all that stuff. And, you hear that all the time with the vets. So it's good. Hopefully one of the vets are going to take him under his wing. I know a lot of Bears fans think, oh, he's 25. He's already like a vet, but it's a different mentality when they get to the pros there. So.
Oh no, absolutely.
Let's jump over the Packers because the Packers, they got some serious injuries here. We're going to talk about the offensive line because they got 3 guys that are all questionable. They have 4 total questionable, but 3 were on the offensive line. 2 of them are starters. And right tackle, he can kind of play anywhere. But Elgton Jenkins, he has a knee injury. He's questionable. He is slated as the Packers starting right tackle, but like I said, he's played all over the line. He's a very talented lineman. If he can't play, that's a big deal. So what do you know about his knee injury?
So he had an ACL tear and he's about 10 months out. Now, you have the Adrian Petersons of the world and some of these crazy stories of individuals who are coming back in like 7 months, things like that. You're at about 75, 80% at 1 year in terms of being back to who you were. And that's if you're doing everything correctly. You don't get to 100% until 2 years. There's study upon study upon study that show this. He just started doing team drills last week. Like, that's the first time he's done team drills. Now, I've had 2 ACL tears myself, and I know the feeling. I remember being 6, 7 months out and feeling like, I mean, I could play a basketball game right now. I'm good. And I'm looking at my PT at the time, like, why can't I go do this? It's not necessarily the issue of how you feel in that moment. It's about, can that ligament actually hold? And you don't really have a feeling of what that's actually going to be like. You also don't have a feeling of what it's going to be like in the fourth quarter, right? You've been playing for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And there's also a bit of a connectivity issue. So, like, are you connected to your knee? That's a whole thing, the neuromuscular control. They actually see that that's one of the things that lacks the most is you don't really know where your leg is in space. So actually, when they've done studies and looked at that they've looked at, people cannot say like, hey, my leg is 5 degrees. It's actually at 25 degrees. And so now imagine you're a right tackle and you think that that leg is solidly put, knees in the right place, and it's not. And all of a sudden you got another lineman that's crashing down on it. It's a recipe for disaster. Now, he was a full participant, and we talked about this a little bit behind the scenes. I think it's more of a desperation thing. I think he probably feels fine. The Packers think he feels fine. And it's like, you know what? We need you in there. And a good example is Odell Beckham. We talked about that too. He retore same ACL because he came back too soon. He felt great. The team, he thought he felt great, but a couple months later, second tear. So is he necessarily going to be 100% in this game? I think he's playing. I think Elton Jenkins is going to be playing in there because they need him to play in there.
Yeah.
But he's not going to be full Elton Jenkins. The question is him at 75% better than whoever else they have to play that position, right, at 100%?
Yeah, I mean, with Jenkins, I mean, it sounds like it'd be the best thing for the player to kind of wait. But so is there a chance he could re-injure himself? I mean, that's part of it here, where if he decides to sit out, I mean, it's, they have to look at the year. I mean, the Packers assume they're going to be, one of the top teams in the conference. Jenkins, one of their top offensive linemen, is there a chance he can kind of play and he's not the same guy he was, and he could do more damage to that knee?
There is always a chance of that. I mean, I think he's going to come into this game and you'll see shades of what he was, be like, okay, you know what? He's on his way back. He's a little rusty, but he's on his way back. The question for him is more the long term, right? What's it going to look like in December? What's it going to look like in January? Are we all of a sudden going to be watching, week 18 game with the Packers and being like, oh man, there it goes. That tore again. That'd be, as a physical therapist, that'd be my biggest concern.
The other side, left tackle, David Bhaktiari, another knee injury. This guy has been on the sidelines quite a bit the last couple of years. So what's the latest you got on this guy's injury?
This is a whole other story.
Yeah.
I mean, oh man, there's just a point too where you've got so many knee injuries and so much trauma to a certain area that the tissue just is highly reactive. He's had 3 knee surgeries this offseason, right before OTAs was his last one. But if you go back, December 31st, he tore his ACL in practice and then was ruled out for the remainder of the season. And they actually had to cut out 10 to 15% of his meniscus. Now, the meniscus is really important because it actually sits in the knee at an angle and allows that femur to be able to roll very easily. Without it, that knee catches, it just doesn't roll the right, and you actually can push the cartilage a little more, and that's where you can get a lot of inflammation. And actually, he talked about how he was dealing with a bunch of buildup in the knee that required drainage over and over and over again. And doctors actually found additional cartilage damage that required a November operation, and that delayed that return that he was supposed to be in. He played 27 snaps in 2021 in that meaningless week 18 game against the Lions, but that re-aggravated it. And he actually went on to say 4 or 5 days after the Detroit game, we end up pulling 88 cc's of fluid out. I'm like, this is blank nightmare. Like, this thing won't end. The problem with that is if you have anywhere between 5 to 10 cc's of fluid in your knee, that can reduce the output of your quadricep by up to 50%. And he had 88. And it just kept going and going. Like, he had 2 surgeries in a calendar year and it would get inflamed and angry. And he felt structurally good, but he just couldn't get the leg to operate with him. I mean, that was January 26, 2022. That was recently that he was saying that, how frustrated he was with this knee. And so it's like, you hear all these things about how he's taking some 11 on 11 reps. Oh, we plan for him to have this veteran day. It's,
Yeah.
man, I do not think he's playing. And if he is playing, it is going to be at a very low efficiency unless he is just, slamming stuff you shouldn't slam into that knee to make it feel good.
Well, they showed us a clip on Twitter from him from Wednesday's practice, and you could see a visible limp. And then they talked about how Thursday was, like you said, it was a scheduled off day for him. He's back at practice again on Friday, again in a limited capacity. So 2 limiteds, 1 day off, and like I said, that film they did show, man, he did not look right, and it's just like he's 30 years old. He's an all pro. I'm sure he wants to get out there as much as possible, but again, like Jenkins, this is a little more from the severe case with the knee injury, but it seems like he's probably not play.
I would be very surprised if he played. Even if he does, it's going to be not the Bhaktiari that you want out there. I would expect it to be a situation where if he lined up and you have a Dominique Robinson, this young gun, fresh, spry, going at him, he's gonna be able to beat him around the edge. But again, I don't think he's playing.
So from a Bears fan standpoint, look, let's get them both out there, see what they got in the tank. But I mean, it just does seem like best long term to have them both sit. Then they got another guy that hurt. John Runyon is in concussion protocol. We talked a little bit about this, pre-show. He missed his first 2 days of practice, and he was a limited participant today. But from what you were saying, it's a different kind of a protocol as far as just doing some little limited stuff in practice to being game ready. Correct?
Yeah, so yeah, he was still technically in the concussion protocol and has taken steps in the process by doing some drills, right? Whenever you have a concussion, you have to go through certain steps. So you do everyday. Can you go through your everyday activities of daily living, washing your hair, driving your car without symptoms? That's headaches, nausea, vomiting, light sensitivity, those concussion-y things, dizziness. Then you move on to light cardiovascular. Can you do 5 to 10 minutes of a bike or a run? No lifting. Again, if you can do it without symptoms, you move on. You move on to moderate activity. So you're trying to get your heart rate up to the individual's heart rate max. If you're trying to do it the old school dumb way, it's 220 minus your age. If you're doing it more scientifically, which the NFL does, it's a whole calculation that I'm not going to bore you with. But then once you can do that, heavy non-contact. So I think that's kind of where the stage he is now. So we're just running through some general drills, no contact or anything, sprinting, running, biking, and you can get into a weightlifting routine moving through all those planes. The next one is practice full contact. So you have to clear that before you get to competition. Between now and then, I'm not really sure when or how he's going to do full non-contact. So my thought would be, unless they're figuring out the way to kind of wiggle and maneuver through there, that he's also not going to play just because he hasn't been a full participant yet in that concussion protocol, or he hasn't left it.
Yeah, I mean, they'll have their walkthrough tomorrow morning probably, but like you said, it's not going to be a full go. I mean, there's not going to be a lot of contact. Not going to be able to do enough running around in condition to even show where he's at in the protocol. So it looks like, man, the Packers could be missing 3 linemen. 2 guys that are really key members of that unit. So that's rough for them, and that bodes well for Robert Quinn, Dominique Robinson, Travis Gibson. These guys, it's coming off the edge. It's going to be dangerous. Then, of course, the Packers have one more injury. That's Al-Mazari, wide receiver, ankle. There was some clips of him on Twitter as well, and he looks a little better than these other guys. You think he'll play in this game?
Yeah, so the thing that stinks with the NFL and how to control the media that gets out there, you don't really get to see too many 11 on 11s and things like that. But from some of the clips we did see, he was able to run his route efficiently. There wasn't a limp to it. He was able to translate his body weight laterally over the foot and actually able to pronate or actually get that big toe down into the ground. And when you're at that angle like that, I mean, that puts a lot of stress on the lateral ligaments of the ankle, ATFL, etc. And he was able to do that fine, and come out of his cut. So it looked great. I mean, it wasn't a high ankle sprain. If it was, it would have been a much longer recovery. We wouldn't even be having this conversation. So my assumption was that it was a lateral ankle sprain. And I mean, he's going to be back. Again, it's similar to Elton Jenkins. They need him. So so it's one of those things where it's like, hey, you know what? Your foot's feeling even 80%, you're out there. So he's playing.
Let's face it, he's probably their best receiver. I mean, if you look at what they have on the roster right now, and plus, the last couple years in Green Bay, he's more known for their blocker. He's a physical presence. He's not really a quick, twitchy guy that's doing all the real sharp cuts. So if you can get him out there, maybe to do some box out moves, just some nice, spin and catch the ball. If you can block in the run game, I think that's why they want him out there because, like you said, they need him. The rest of the receiving core is, I know a lot of Bears have been getting ripped in the media. It's like, have they forgotten what they have in Green Bay? The ghost of Sammy Watkins is one of their guys, and Watson and Doubs. I mean, rookies they're counting on to be big participants, and of course with Lazard, the ankle injury. So, there's some issues here in the Packer offense, and of course, Aaron Rodgers. Is he the same Aaron Rodgers that he has been? At one point does the decline come from him? I know as Bears fans we want it to come right now, but I think he'll probably be okay for another year, maybe.
Well, it's funny because you have a lot of Packers media as well as Packers fans talking about, Aaron Rodgers is 23-5 straight up and 21-7 against the spread versus the Bears, if you include playoffs. Rodgers has won and covered the last 6 meetings against Chicago. He is 8-1 straight up and 9-0 against the spread versus the Bears after a straight up loss. And all of that is true. You know what's also true? He doesn't have Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the offensive coordinator he used to have. Luke Getsy is now on the opposite sideline. And like you said, his main 2 receivers right now are Christian Watson, who drops that wide open pass and Rodgers basically ignored for like 3 quarters after that. And then you have Dobbs. You have the, again, ghost of Sammy Watkins, the corpse of Randall Cobb, and Lazard, who's...
Oh, I forgot about Cobb. Oh, my God.
Yeah, right. And then I don't think... And Tunyon's not... And Tunyon's
he's back.
He's coming off his own
back.
Injury stuff.
Yep.
I'm not worried about him currently. I think he's got 3 weeks before he's like 100. It's not the same. I mean, Rodgers is still a bad man. Don't get me wrong, but the cast around him is not the same.
It was fun watching him be so pissed off in the game. He on the sideline he was pissed. He was a real man on the field when stuff was going on. It's like Fox found him on those moments where you just can feel his frustration. And then, let's keep it going one more week. Let's 0-2. It'll be awesome. The injury list obviously favors the Bears this week, but the talent disparity is still, Packers are a 10-point favorite. So let me ask you real quick, who you picking in the game straight up? Who you picking with the spread?
Spread, I'm absolutely taking the Bears. 10 points
Nice.
Is a lot. That's too many points, especially with everything we just talked about. And like if you made me put like money on it on the money line, like a lot of money that would hurt me, I'd probably say Packers. But I do think that there's an upset chance here. I really do. Like there was something off just about that game last week. And I get it. Justin Jefferson is also a bad man, and he was just making them look silly. I don't know why they didn't have Jair shadow him. That's a whole other conversation. Mooney's not Jair. There's all these things going on there. But when you're riding off of what the Bears did last week, even with all the things going on, and when you have as much question marks and you don't have your safety blanket of Devontae Adams, like go back and look at the like advanced stats and where the Devontae's catches came and how important he was. That was a huge difference of not having him there. Like just having your automatic third down, that's who I have. Oh, like literally Devontae is the difference between your drive continuing and punting. And I think that's going to be a reason why the Bears can actually win this just straight up.
I was so glad when he left the Packers because I think a lot of Packers fans thought it's all Rodgers. It's a Rodgers show, but it's like, that's a good ass receiver over there, And then with the Raiders, man, I mean, he had a hell of a game the first week. So I'm good for it. I mean, I'm with you. I think the Bears can cover. I think there's a chance the Bears win, but I'm not quite ready to step out there and make that bold prediction yet. But Mason, I want to thank you so much again, jumping on with us. We got some cool stuff in the works. We're kind of, we'll keep in the closet for now, but at some point we are going to introduce something coming up really cool with Mason as well. So, but that's it, guys. Make sure you guys are all following Mason at West Sports PT. Follow me on Twitter at WiltFongJR, Second City Gridiron YouTube channel, Windy City Gridiron on the website, podcast channel as well. But until next time, bear down, my friends. Nice. Mason, man, that was good. Man, you just dropped the knowledge, man. It's like that. There's these words. I feel like I have to have like a big glossary here sometime just so people know what's going on. But the context you use them, like, oh, I understand what he means by that. I never heard that word in my life, but I kind of get the gist of where you're going with it. It was cool.
Cool, I appreciate that. It's always fun trying to translate what's in my brain to patients, and then trying to now do the same thing on podcast.
No, I mean it's good. Like I said, it's awesome perspective. I know everyone really appreciates it. We got a lot of good feedback on the podcast channel, on the video channel, on the site. So, and I appreciate it, man. It's awesome. And but it's Friday night, so I'm gonna let you get out of here. I'm gonna cut this up and put it on the podcast, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, we'll chat.
All right, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Have a good
Thanks,
one.
guys. Thanks for showing up. Second City Gridiron. Make sure you subscribe, like, share, all that stuff, and we'll guys see you next week.